From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. Now let's get to this week's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by John Buchanan. John, thanks for coming in and having a chat.
Pleasure, Chris.
John, we're going to start what are we on? Thursday, the 5th of June, 1:37 in the afternoon. How's your Thursday been, John?
As per normal, I'm up doing a little bit of exercise this morning, which is nice. Climbing to Mount Cootha and looking out over the vista and the sunrise, which is always a nice thing to do of a Thursday morning. And then a couple of meetings, a couple of catch-ups with people that hopefully can do some business with, and the other was a bit of a review on our business sport connection network, how the event went last night, what we can improve, what the next month look like. So that's been sort of the day so far.
Fantastic. Now, a couple of things, mountain climbing and business. I've had the pleasure of being part of your courses about talking about Everest and what you do. Can you talk about what you do now and aligning that business and sport analogy?
Yeah, sure. Look, the business is around coaching and leadership. It's about, I guess, the lessons that I've learnt through my life, both as a parent, as a young person growing up, trying to forge their way in a whole range of different ways, and then being involved as a professional sports coach. And so trying to take those lessons and then bring them into the corporate world and really exploring, I think, the power of quality coaching as it can help leaders trying to lead, as it can help individuals wanting to improve their life or their work life, or a combination of all, and also around teams, how to get the best from teams, how to keep them on track, how to, again, chase their Everest and work out whether they're going in the right direction. So that's really what the business is about, and it crosses all different industries, different people, and different ways of delivering that.
I was chatting to a couple of athletes in sort of individual sports, but then they may be part of a broader team, for instance, like a swimmer, part of the Olympic squad, they're part of the Dolphins. When it comes to cricket, which you're very versed in, there's individual aspects and team aspects. As a player yourself and as a young kid, which did you morph towards, the team sport or the individual sport?
Guess I was always a team sport, and that's possibly because I was an only child, so I had enough of the individual stuff growing up, so I was always then hankering towards being part of a group. So certainly really always enjoyed being part of a team, and whether that was cricket or rugby, tennis, whatever it might have been, just enjoyed that camaraderie and working together as a group to try to achieve something.
And in terms of your own sporting prowess as you're growing up and playing cricket, cricket was the chosen one which took you a little bit further than the others. Why cricket?
Well, it probably goes back to my early school days, where at school I was at a boarding school, but I wasn't a boarder, I was a day boy, and my parents would bring out a couple of the boarders of a weekend so that they could get out of school and school food and the school routines and get a bit of home cooking and a bit of love and care from quasi parents, and at the same stage were quasi brothers for me, and so we'd spent a lot of time in the backyard playing cricket. My father built a homemade cricket pitch from old trawling prawner nets and TV antenna tubes, and that's how we sort of played our test match cricket, and using an old ABC cricket book and drawing names out of a hat, we put together our sides and then play that. So cricket was probably the sport that I gravitated to because of that, I guess, but also it was part and parcel of my dreams and my imagination, because you could listen to that on the radio and listen to, the broadcasters telling their stories and painting pictures of what cricket might have been over in England when all you had was a radio and precious little black and white TV. So that created, I think, in me the passions and the dreams about cricket. It certainly had that in other sports, but somehow cricket just seemed to ignite something in there that said that that's what I was going to do. I was going to play cricket for Australia, and that was my dream as a young boy.
When you're drawing those names out and listening to the radio, what are the names that come back? What are the names and the memories that come back to who do you always love to play, as and also idolise,
Yes,
and also on the commentary
yeah.
team?
Oh, look, obviously always a lot of Australians in there, so everywhere from the Bradmans to the Richardsons to the Hassetts to the Millers, the Lindwalls, and of course my age therefore dates me a little bit, therefore I go back a little bit further maybe, but it was always those players, and then I guess in my time the current players centred around the Tom Vivers and the Ken Mackays and the Peter Burgess, which are all Queensland players, the Wally Grouts, and then Simpson, Laurie, etc. So um, it was a mixture of all those, but it wasn't just Australian. We'd always throw in a few Indian names and a few English names, a few South African names, and then yes, draw them out of the hat, and away we went.
And then your playing days, you want to talk about that and the idea potentially of being a coach and when that spark came?
Yeah, look, the spark didn't really come for a long time. It was a dream of playing cricket, being that professional cricketer and aspiring to wear the baggy green cap. And when that one disappeared, then I followed a path of sports administration. I had a human movement studies degree, and I really then thought, well, maybe this is the career path for me, and I could one day be an outstanding sports administrator. And again, pursued that for a while till the job I was occupying at the time was National Director of Australian Volleyball, and they moved the office to Canberra. And at that time, we had two young children, and so said, no, just can't do it, not going to Canberra, and I'll look for something else. So I then got a diploma of teaching and moved into teaching in TAFE. And well, that was good. It wasn't necessarily the right fit, I didn't think, for me, or I wasn't the right fit for it. So explored then the path of becoming a lecturer, so using education plus sport and marrying the two together. And we went overseas, and I embarked on a master's in sports administration and sports coaching at the University of Alberta, and came back and started lecturing, of all places, at the University of Canberra. So
Sorry, you don't want to go
did
there.
that for a couple of years.
Yep,
Yeah. But we always wanted to come back to Brisbane, so I was always searching for jobs up here, and eventually came back and managed a national program called Aussie Sports, which was a joint program of the Sports Commission, the Department of Education, the Department of Tourism, Sport and Racing. But it was a program that I really believed wholeheartedly in, because it was about sport, but it was actually bringing sport to the level of children. So you were actually trying to ensure that children, which are generally upper primary or early secondary, that their first experiences in sport were really enjoyable. So, in other words, we modified rules, we modified equipment, and importantly, I guess we were trying to modify some of the behaviours on the side of sports fields, so that the children were really just enjoying the freedom to play this thing called sport.
And you've seen some codes now, obviously, with things like Auskick that sort of adapt that and make that a huge thing. And you've seen some sports not do it so well. So you must be kind of abreast of that now a little bit, and to see what sports have risen ahead in terms of what you were almost establishing early on.
Well, it was that. I mean, this was the beginnings of kangaroo cricket. It was the beginnings of mini rugby, and all sports had their various titles. And yeah, look, I think again, most sports have adapted that pretty well. They understand that children these days, or any days for that matter, but that they need things at their level, that they can experience at their level, and through modifications of rules and equipment and so on. It means the sport's accessible to all children of all abilities, and so yeah, therefore that's why I think sport, and I always enjoyed sport or physical activity, is so important to a child's development. And I currently, with a couple of partners, I have a business in India which has taken an Australian business which is called Ready Steady Go Kids. Fantastic program, and I got to see this because my grandchildren started uh, being involved in the program here in Brisbane, and that's where I got to see it. And I thought, wow, this is a very, very good program. It's scientifically based, and it introduces children to 10 different sports over the course of a term, where they just get to sample the sport, but again, modified equipment, wonderful instructors on the floor, and again, they enjoy what they're doing. And so, with a couple of business partners, we've taken that into India, and bought a franchise there, or master franchise there. Of course, we bought that just pre-COVID, so that was really good timing. For about 2.5 years, nothing happened while COVID,
Yep.
did its thing. So it's going, and we have our Indian business partner. So again, it's they're designed to for 1.5 to 6 year old children, to get them to understand basic movement patterns and coordination, balance, agility, in a very, very safe environment. And we use, in India, we use 13 sports rather than 10 here in Australia. And we've added in 3 Indian sports, which are kabaddi, kho and yoga. So, yeah, it's, I think, like everything, whether it be maths or music or language, but in this case, sport, the earlier that young children can get exposed to it in a very safe, encouraging, and supportive way, it's lifelong learning. It's something that they will always have, whether they continue to use it for competition, or whether they just continue to use it as a means, in this case, of activity, physical activity. There's every chance that they will, because they've enjoyed the experience and they've got the foundations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just chatting to Tim McKinnon recently, who's the CEO of Play HQ, and they do all the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure behind grassroots cricket and AFL, etc. And he was, talking about the challenges and distractions of kids these days with social media and gaming and Roblox and Fortnite, etc. A lot of a different challenge to when we were growing up. John, is more about where the local club was and I suppose who were playing and whether there was a competition. From grassroots sport, which you were developing there, to then getting into a high performing, pre-professional era, but certainly coaching high performing teams. When did that come about in terms of cricket and your early kind of views of becoming a coach per se as a profession?
Yes, I think, we were alluding to that I was sort of working and coaching and then into that Aussie sport program. And it was about June 94 when the Queensland Bulls job was advertised, and Jeff Thompson had been there for 4 years, I think, by that stage, and been doing a very good job. So I was a bit sceptical whether or not this was a real advertisement, or whether it was one of those ones that you sort of have to do, but you know who's going to get the job. But I was assured by Ian Healy, who was captain at the time, that no, it was for real. So that's when I kind of looked back on everything that I was doing, and I realised that, in a sense, one, I theoretically had been learning more about coaching and a bit of psychology and a bit of strategy and organisational structures and so on. I've been doing it by all my work, because I've been working with various teams within the businesses or the roles that I had. I'd still kept an association with the sport, and having come back to Brisbane and doing this Aussie sport job, I'd gone back to university and started coaching back there for a couple of seasons. So there seemed to be a number of things that suggested to me that maybe I can coach, and maybe I have been without actually realising that's what I've been doing. And of course, by that stage, when the job came around, we had 5 children. So there's nothing like parenting to give you some insight into coaching. So then, I took the step to apply. I kind of spent time trying to understand me as a coach, because again, I was never going to be able to compete against the likes of a Jeff Thompson and all the kind of former players that have applied, because my cricket pedigree was nowhere near as deep and as extensive and as impressive as most of the other applicants. So what was it that I was going to bring that would be different and would be seen to be by those at Queensland Cricket to be the right person for the job? So it just took me down that path of understanding me, understanding my principles, my values, cornerstones, and how I'd go about doing the job. So that's where it started in June '94, and we were, fortunate that first year that we won the Sheffield Shield, and I guess that cemented my path as a professional coach, but it probably more cemented my knowledge of myself as a coach and the power of quality coaching. So that's continued to be my life since then. I spent four years with Queensland, and then another nearly 8 years with the Australian cricket team, a couple of seasons over in India with IPL, and in that last period with the Australian team, I was setting up this business, which I'm currently doing, which is Buchanan Success Coaching, which where we started it's all about coaching and leadership and the power of coaching to deliver on high performance teams, leaders, being able to create that, and individuals that sit inside that and understand how they can perform at their best.
Do you think when you took that job, I think it was the 69th season that Queensland had been in and hadn't won the Sheffield Shield, did you think that, as a challenge, you thought, oh, actually, there's something here to break this cycle? Or were you thinking, oh, well, I'll give it a go, but, everyone's tried in the past and, well, if we don't win in the next couple of years, at least I've given it a good shot?
Well, I went into it on the basis that I wasn't there to win the Holy Grail. Or at least that wasn't the key objective. The key objective for me was to say, look, what we'll do here is that we'll put Queensland in a position where we can dominate the domestic competition for the next 10 years. And we'll do that through changing system and process. And somewhere in there, though, I believe we'll win the Sheffield Shield. I wouldn't be able to say when, but the important thing is that we'll actually understand a little bit more about how we did that, so that we will be in a far better position then to be able to continue to do that, whether or not that means you win again, but it means that we're going to challenge, and as I say, we're going to dominate the competition for the next 10 years. So that's how I went into it, on the basis that, yes, I guess I did believe that it would happen, but it was more about actually setting up a high performance system that would sustain itself and that could then continue to sustain itself over a period of time.
I'm curious to know the 10 years, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Is that something which has always been like a goal of yours in terms of time? Some people might be 3, 5, 10. Like, is 10 just something that kind of sits well with you?
Yeah, look, it's not necessarily a timeline that I have. So when I went into the Australian team, it was about telling them we're going on a journey to Everest together, and that's where the Everest concept, or my Everest concept, sort of started. And that journey, I said I didn't really know how long that would take, but the principle of it was that we were going to change the way the game was played, and that we wanted everybody else to look at us, and again, a sense of dominating your marketplace. And then also, and that was assisted because I had a a very good relationship, or, it developed over time, but with Stephen Waugh, because his mantra was around taking the road less travelled. So he wanted to do things differently to everybody else, and so did I. And as I said, by the time, as I said, that we finished our time as a group together, that we would have changed the game, and hopefully we'd be given a really, a good label, if you like, about what we did, a bit like the Invincibles in Australian cricket history. So that was kind of the starting point. So it wasn't necessarily timeline, but there was still always this vision that whatever we're doing, we're going to do it better than anybody else.
And the relationship between the coach and a captain, and having a good captain, can you talk about that relationship, with how close it becomes? You become mates, you might become godparents of each other's children or something, or is it a little bit coach-captain?
Look, I think in any business, and let's take it, that Australian cricket team as a small wheel within the big business of Cricket Australia. And their vision at the time was, and maybe it still is, I don't know these days, but its vision at the time was to make Cricket Australia's favourite summer sport. And so for me, that's an admirable vision, but it didn't sit with a cricket team in my mind. So that's why I went about trying to create this vision of Everest and what it meant. Because if we could chase that down and head in that direction and get our wheel working well, then that would help Cricket Australia do what it needed to do. And so a function of all that is cohesion, harmony, relationships. But one of the critical links in all that is the captain and the coach. Or in a business sense, it might be the CEO and the chairman of the board, or it might be, a CEO and a CFO, or the senior leadership team. And if those that link is tenuous, if it's disconnects at different stages, then a team or a group might be successful for a short period of time, but won't be successful over a longer period of time. So that relationship between captain and coach, in this particular case in the cricket team, needed to be strong. And it didn't mean that Stephen and I agreed on everything all the time, and indeed we had different ways of doing what we need to do, but our philosophy, our principles, our values were well aligned. And I think we were both a very good support for each other, in terms of him being the captain and leading the team, and on field running the show, and then from my point of view, maybe helping set longer term strategies and therefore, or longer term goals, and then longer term strategies, and then bringing that down game by game, and also delving into the whole world of, I guess, analytics and data, and where all that fitted into the overall mix about taking this team in the direction that we thought it should be able to go and achieve.
Mm. And I was just thinking about the timing of all that. Google was probably starting to happen around the early 2000s, and people were starting to use search engines, and the internet was coming around probably around the early 2000s. But you mentioned there about data and strategy. What was it about you thinking that actually there is a lot of data in cricket? How do we capture it all? Not only do we capture it all, how do we use it?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think I would find it hard, well, certainly harder coaching now than by the time I finished. So I finished it, as I said, 2007 with the Australian team, 2009 in India. But at that stage, there wasn't really, the internet was chugging along a little bit. Maybe I don't even know. I don't even think Facebook or any of the.
No, I think it was
various,
07 maybe. I think Facebook, 06, 07 came about. Yeah.
Or whatever. It's, remember there was another
MySpace.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
So to some degree, Warney was our guide to how you use your phones and how you text. But other than that, there wasn't the same social media. So I think that's an incredible complication to coaching these days. But back in '94, when I took on the role, that was one of the systems and processes that we really wanted to change, because my view was that there's lots of knowledge and expertise in the room in inverted commas, that, whether you're in the dressing room, whether you're on the training paddock, or whether you're on the field, all that knowledge and experience that is held within the players that are there. Some being, like a Healy or an Alan Border had come back, or a Carl Rackerman, lots of experience. So we wanted that, but at the same stage, that's reliant on their memories and their views and their thoughts, which is great. But there's a lot of gaps in between. So how do I fill in the gaps? And so that's where, with one of our assistant coaches, Jimmy Hunter, his brother was a Microsoft programmer at the time. I said, well, there's this computer stuff happening. What can that do for us? How can that help us capture information that would be relevant to the group? And so that's where we explored that whole basis of data capture, and then aligning it to vision, and then being able to utilize that either in team meetings or individual feedback, and importantly, analysis, beginning to stack up game after game, so we could be in a better position to analyse our opposition, so that when you went into a team meeting, or you wanted to use the experience of everybody in the room, you had that, but now you could actually supplement that with a lot of accurate data and information.
There must have been so much data to potentially choose from when it comes to cricket. Like, you could do every ball and where every ball lands, etc. How did you kind of dumb it down to a point of going, this is useful, this is actually useful data?
Yes, look, and I mentioned Jimmy Hunter before, and we started back in the VHS days. That's where it was, and so at the end of a Shield game, we'd have 24 hours of vision, so we'd actually record what happened straight down the wicket. We'd have 24 hours of vision, and then I'd go back into the game and say to Jim, listen, I need this, this, and this, and this, and this. And so poor old Jim then had to take the 24 hours of vision, sift through that, and then transfer it onto another VHS tape, so we could then actually show that through the course of the game. So even then, there was a dumbing down, trying to pick out either highlights of the game that were important to us because of what we did, and maybe some other parts of the game that we didn't do so well, and so therefore these are areas that we individually or collectively can improve upon. And so that's really where it grew from. And I guess, like all people these days, there is, as you say, just an incredible wealth of data, probably way too much, just way too much. And that was feedback that I would get from the players at different times when we'd run our meetings, or I'd provide them individual feedback. Most players just want to go and play. Most staff members just want to turn up today and do their job and get it done and do the best they possibly can, and then leave it. Because business in competition every day. Whereas sport, has a bit of a luxury. There's a bit of downtime before you move into your game, play your game, and then you review, and then you go back into preparing for the next. So a lot of times it's still trial and error, because some individuals or some situations require less information or require more information, or there are certain things that you want to highlight that maybe, because you're involved in it as a player, you don't necessarily see. You see your performance, you see some result, but there are other things going on that might be important, not only to you as an individual, but as a group over a period of time. And an example of that was towards the end of my career. And in fact, it was our World Cup 2007 in the West Indies, and I took the players on a boot camp before that, which to many that was something that they really didn't look forward to, but by the end of it, I think it worked out pretty well. But the reason for that was that I guess I was reflecting even back to 2004 on a couple of performances, and then between 2003 World Cup and therefore this 2007 World Cup, I just believe there are certain things that we really needed to change around. We needed to at least be aware of, and so that was kind of the process about trying to provide them the information and the tools without overburdening them with too much information, but enough to get them to understand that there were certain things that I think we were missing or we were shortcutting that were making us vulnerable at certain times, certainly in a one-day game. And so we basically grabbed that information. We provided the players their own little playstations. So one, they could fiddle around and play games, but we knew at the same stage we could put information in there that we needed for them to actually look at and analyse, so that when we came to games or came to meetings or whatever it was, we were well prepared to do that.
When it comes to high performance and the data, how much time did you spend on your own A, individual data, B, team data, versus looking at your competition and looking across in the lane going, what are they doing?
Yeah. As I said right at the outset, basically we were there to change the game. So we wanted other people to be looking at what we were doing. So there was always an idea of what the opposition were doing, trying to find, strengths, weaknesses, where we could utilise our skills to exploit their weaknesses. But ultimately, you'd always try to bring it back to yourselves, that, what it is that you were doing well, what it is that individuals in the team were doing well, how they could improve their game, how we could improve our game. And that was really, I guess, always the emphasis, So when I coach in business these days, I'll always try to take either the team or the leader or the individuals back to their personal best, just like any athlete. When they perform at their best, what is it that they're doing? Because it just seems to me that's where you want to start from. That should be your starting block. If you understand that, if you know how you do that, and then if you know in game or in competition how you adapt to what the game throws at you, because again, like any game plan, it's terrific to have a game plan and, understand our opposition and understand our skills. Well, because we're dealing in human behaviour, very little of that follows the script. So it's nice to have, but it's about how you deal with what's exactly in front of you. And so that becomes part and parcel then of, that knowing when you're at your best, what do you do? Because it's what's inside your control that matters, because we don't control how our opposition are going to play, how a wicket's going to play, what are the conditions overhead going to be like, what are the umpires going to do, what's the crowd involvement like, what's the traffic like getting to the ground, whatever it might be. But what we do control is then ourselves. And so if we understand that, then we're in a better position to give ourselves best chance of getting near our PB or exceeding our PB. No guarantees, but at least if we understand that, it's a good starting point.
And you've got 11 players on the ground at once and a 12th man as well, but getting each of those 11 players up to the level of their personal best must have been a little tricky. Maybe someone gets 100 but the team loses. Maybe someone gets a 5 and the team loses. How did you get that everyone elevated, the processes? And I suppose sometimes some personalities will rise above to the top a little bit.
Yeah, look, there's always that fluctuation happening in it. And, I guess one of the measures of a very successful team is that if I look back on say game one, you might have 2 or 3 players that if you gave it a percentage ranking, they might be, 100% or at least 80% of what a PB might be or what an expectation of their performance should be. Then you might have another, 3 or 4 that are sitting around 50 to 70%. And then you'll have the rest who are somewhere between probably 0 and 30%. But the important thing about a very good team is it's not those people with those percentages are not the same people every game. So performance will fluctuate. And so therefore, going back to what I was saying before, what becomes important is that each player gives themselves best chance to perform at their best. So again, another saying for me is that I want them to be their own best coach. I want them to completely understand how they go about playing at their best, because again, that gives them the best chance of doing that. And so that's what we set out to do. If you've got 11 players on the field, or you've got a touring party of 15 or 17 or wherever it might be, you're constantly trying to ensure that each person knows what they need to prepare, and then knows what they need to do in game. And so you're trying to make sure that is occurring. Now, of course, you've always got limited time, limited resources to do that. Therefore, the players also need to understand their mates next to them, what they are looking for at the same stage. So how do we all make sure that in some way, shape, or form, we may not necessarily get everything we want when we want it, but how do we all work together to try to make sure that the collective is pretty close to what it is that they need prior to going into a game.
And John, with you mentioned one day internationals, and the game is changing a little bit in terms of higher scores and different ways of thinking. How much sort of did you go about testing ways of thinking and looking at now the modern day with different ways of thinking? How did you go about that, I suppose, in trialing and erroring, a few different things?
Yeah, look, again, a bit like social media, it was a slightly simpler arrangement back in our day, so that there was only test matches and 1 days, and T20 had just really started to come in, and that's why I say I was involved in the first couple of IPLs in 2008, 2009. So yeah, look, in essence, I think all games, no matter what the sport, are the same. It doesn't matter how long they take, because really, to perform, you need to perform in terms of what is in front of you. And that means you can have your plan, whether you're playing in cricket sense, a short format game, a T20 game, or a 1 day game, to a longer game, a 4 day game or a 5 day game. It still comes down to the fact that it's still a one ball game. It's just one ball. I mean, you can only bowl one ball, you can only face one ball, you can only field one ball. So the one ball then is obviously placed in the context of the format. So one ball in 120 balls of a T20 innings is just under 1%. You take one ball in a 300 ball game, which is a 50 over game. So now we're down to 0.03% of its impact, if you like, or of its contribution to the outcome of a game. And then if you place that one ball in a 90 over game or a 90 over day, again, you get the difference. But the principle is still the same, that you can only deal with that one ball. Now, therefore, as a bowler, bat, fieldsman, wicketkeeper, how do I adapt my skills to what the game requires at this moment in time against that one ball? So, therefore, as a player, have I now a menu that I can choose from that enables me to best compete to win that moment? And therefore, if it's a longer game, maybe I have a more conservative set of or mindset, and therefore when I dive into my menu, I only look for more conservative options that will win me the moment. As I shorten that right down to T20, then in that moment, to win that moment, maybe I now need to make sure that I've got a broader menu so that I now can choose something that will be less conservative, possibly more relevant to the format of the game, and therefore be able to employ that skill. But it's still about adaptation. It's still about the decision-making process. It's still about actually having a clear mind at that moment so that you are able then to, it sounds like a long process, and this is all happening in a split second, of course, but you are able with a clear mind then to jump into all your experiences and out of that experiential database that you hold in your mind, because you've trained so much and it's a bit of muscle memory. Then you go in and you make the right choice of action, behavior that you need to take right at that moment. Then, of course, it goes back to then your ability to execute, which is really your technical and your physical skills that you've trained as well. And hopefully those two coalesce to give you an opportunity to win that moment. And then if you get through that moment, you get to face the next moment, or you get to deliver the next moment. But the principles are still the same. It's just, it is a bit contextual, and it's about understanding how I therefore adapt my skills to what the game requires me to do right at this moment.
And through all those moments, you get to maybe a pivotal moment, like a last ball of the day, or there's a one run to win off the last ball, etc. As a coach, did you see some of these moments and you're like, okay, anything could happen here. I'm not on the field, and how did that make you feel?
Well, that's coaching, that's leadership, that's your role is well long gone by that stage, meaning that hopefully the sort of environments that you set up as a leader and a coach are wonderful learning environments, so that individual players or groups at certain times feel comfortable at that time. They want to be there at those times, so that therefore they can demonstrate through their skills that they're capable of winning those pivotal moments, as you might say. Those pivotal moments have become pivotal simply because of the outcomes of all the other moments that have led up to that. But nonetheless,
Mm.
they are pivotal moments. And so hopefully as a coach, you don't have any direct control over that. Your indirect control has been what you've actually created in the first place to challenge individuals always by ways of scenarios and just the pressures that they may face at any moment through any game, but are ready to deal with that, because that's just something that now becomes really something that they want to do, where they want to be, and to have feel like it's just a natural thing, and their skills are there to support them to do it.
Did you ever have a scenario where you thought the team pretty much just gave everything that they possibly could give in those moments, and thinking about scenario, and then you've come up short? And as a coach, how do you kind of keep that as progress forward as opposed to a loss?
Yeah, look, there are, and and a lot of times some of those results are the ones that are very close, that you just got so close and then just missed out at the end. But again, I think for me it was always, and certainly when I started with the Queensland team, because as you said it earlier in the interview, that they hadn't won for 69 years. So there are a lot of ghosts of the past that would haunt our dressing rooms at different times, because it was always about this Holy Grail. It was always about winning the Sheffield Shield. And of course, that's the result that you would like. But for me, the more that we focus on the result, the further it got away from us. And so, in your question, my job was always to try to bring it back to a process, try to understand, when we play well, what is it that we're doing? If we're not playing well, what is it that we're overlooking? But it's always about what's in our control. So if we, have played well and missed out, well, let's go back in and look at what we've done. Take the result away. What have we done? Is there something in there that we could improve upon? Is there something there that we can learn from for the next time that we face a similar situation? So maybe that the result is reversed. So it's always trying to, yes, understand result, because again, sports build on winning and losing. There's nothing. I mean, you can get draws, but nonetheless, the rules and everything else is set up to win or lose. So it was always then about understanding, yes, we've got to get results, but how do we do that? How do we do that? And if we can understand that, we're in a better position to get those results.
And then every day is different for every human being, and some days we wake up a little tired, and some days we wake up a little grumpy, and some days we wake up really happy with the energy flowing through the squad that you had. You would have had people where confidence was low, and you had to be empathetic to others. How did you manage the feelings with the players sometimes?
Well, I mean, yes, that's so true. And as we said before, we're all human beings and it's human behaviour. And so that's always going to be the case. So, yeah, as a coach, you're always there for all your players, always there for all your players. And whether that's support, whether that's guidance, whether that's reprimand, whatever it might be, you're there to try to help your player. That's what you're trying to do all the time. Or in business, your staff member, they need to know that you care about them. They need to know that irrespective of whether they're getting a bit of a reprimand or it's designed for a purpose to help them to be better at what they're doing and hopefully perform better in their role or their position. But it shouldn't always come down to the coach. So it should be in a high performance team that if a player is down, then other players are aware of that. Some signs are quite visible, obviously, but others aren't. And therefore, when I talk about understanding your own game, being your own best coach, then it's important that that's shared with others, not just kept to yourself. So that if that is the case, if somebody's down on confidence, if somebody's not well, or if there's something happened outside of the dressing room from external reasons or external happenings, then hopefully there are lots of other people around them that can help them through that. And sometimes, the coach is exactly not the right person. I found that a number of times that, if I wanted to, have or make a change or have a different outcome or needed something to be precisely said to individuals. If I was the one to do that, then it was never going to be heard. Either due to our relationship or due to a set of circumstances. And so what I needed to always find was, well, who's the right person at this point in time to do that? How do we actually deal with that person at the moment? And as I say, who could be the right people? So you'll hear a lot of people talk about fit in a team or an organisation. You'll hear them talk about culture. You'll hear them talk about cohesion. Well, that's kind of what I'm saying here, that for me, when you put together a team, that there are assistant coaches, there's a whole range of players and there are other people that you'll bring in at different times. And so it is always important that whoever comes into that mix is always going to change the dynamics because of who they are and their own personalities and their own biases. But importantly, that change of dynamics is something that's not going to be retrograde to the group, but it's only going to add value to the group. So in the end, coach definitely is there to help everybody and try to care for everybody. But in the end, there are so many things going on in a group of people that if everybody takes that responsibility, then it's a much easier job to keep that place as harmonious as possible.
Did you get a bit of stick, I suppose, from trying to change the dynamic from a broader group, I suppose, or say we don't want to do the boot camp as an example? This is ridiculous, this is a joke, and you're like, well, this is the way I want to do it. This is the buy-in, I need, and then obviously, ultimately you won that World Cup, for instance, as an example. But did you get that quite a bit?
Oh, look, there's always resistance, and I think. And not necessarily always from the same people or to the same degree, but that's only human nature because, again, what we're saying here is that if we're going to be a high performance team, for me, high performance means that you're dominating, as I say, your marketplace, but you're doing it over a long period of time under all sets of conditions.
Not just
So
once,
if
not
that's
winning
where
one
you want,
premiership, you're winning multiple premierships, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, if that's where you want to be, then individuals, coaches included, cannot remain in their comfort zone. They cannot remain as they were or as they are if they want to step into the future and be something different. So therefore, that means change. Therefore, that means challenge. Therefore, that means doing things differently. And of course, we all don't necessarily enjoy that. There are things that we don't understand why they're happening, no matter how well they're explained, because things are working well now. So why change? Why change? And so again, I guess part of my saying was, like one of those cliches: if it ain't broke, break it. Because to me, we're always seeking what's better. I wrote the book "If Better Is Possible," and I always believe that everything can be improved, and if something can't be improved, no matter how you've disassembled it and then reassembled it, then you've got something that's really special, and you need to hang on to that in some way, shape, or form. But generally, in the main, most things can be improved if you keep seeking that. And I guess I've just been going back over David Brailsford and what he did with British cycling, and that was just sort of marginal gain theory. So he'd break everything down and then try to improve everything just that 1%. And if you could do that across a whole system and a whole set of processes, boy, what a difference that makes to an individual, to a group of people, to an organisation.
And looking back at what you did as a coach for Queensland and as a coach for Australia, you set out to achieve X, and from my point of view, you achieved X. Did you achieve what you wanted to achieve being the coach there? And looking back, how does it make you feel?
Yeah, look, in fact, I was having this conversation last night because I always believe there's a shelf life in coaching, or I did then, and I still do now. And with Queensland, I was there 4 years, and I was we used to have a pretty informal coaching group, from Aussie rules to rugby league, rugby union, basketball, swimming. A group of us just get together and toss a few things around. And I remember talking to Wayne Bennett about this at the time, and I said, I just believe there's a shelf life in coaching. I think I might have one more year, and then it's time to move on, because in my mind the players needed change. They needed new eyes, new perspectives, new ways of doing things, and hopefully build on what I'd put in place. And he looked at me and he said, mate, you're kidding, aren't you? You're the best coach going around. So why would you want to move on? And as I said, for those very reasons, I just believe it's time to me. He said, look, I'll tell you what happens at the Broncos. Either I go or the players go. And he said, I'm not going. So he had a way of him reinventing himself, which was in a sense not reinventing himself, but changing over the dynamics of his group, keeping some core people in his group, and then making sure that those who came in really fitted into the environment that he had and the way that he went about coaching, and those that he didn't think could, they were moved on. So yeah, for me it was there's a certain length of time, and after that time it is time to look elsewhere. And I was fortunate in a coaching sense that the Australian job came up and I was able to jump into that. But again, same thing, by the time 2007 came around, I'd already given Cricket Australia sort of a 20-month plan after we'd lost the Ashes in 2005, a 20-month plan about how this would occur. And I was exiting at that time if given the opportunity. And so, fortunately everything rolled out well, but nonetheless, they then had a good opportunity to work out the whole succession planning process for them, so that hopefully change was relatively seamless.
And looking back at the the record that everyone talks about, the 16 consecutive wins, when it comes to Everest, where was Everest along there? Was it 12, 13, 14, 15, 16? How did you work out Everest there?
Yeah. No, well, it wasn't really, again, based on result. albeit that was a record, and I think it still stands, and so do a number of other one-day records that we hold. So the results were good. There's no doubt about that, and well, not only good, they were outstanding, and they can still stand. But really, it was about the way that we went about our cricket. That was the Everest. That was the Everest. That was about how we batted, how we fielded, how we bowled, how we planned, how we conducted ourselves. Were we not only models on field, but we were models off field? So it was really, that was all encompassing, and I remember going back to results at the last interview when we won the 2007 World Cup in Barbados, and I was asked by a journo there, because again, I think all coaches would like to coach the perfect game. When the perfect game is, to me, where you have a game plan and you just enact that perfectly, and therefore you get the result that you're looking for. And so I said, look, I don't think we got close a few times. I don't think I ever coached the perfect game, but we got close. But I said we had the perfect team. And what I meant by that was that I believed all players, even McGrath at that stage, that was his last game for Australia as well, were always looking to improve themselves. They were always looking to try to find ways and means that they could be better. And so to me, that was the perfect team. They'd challenge themselves and they'd challenge other people in the group. And that's why it was such an outstanding group over that period of time.
And John, we talked about moments. The question I ask my guests is their all-time favourite sporting moment. It can involve yourself and your group, etc., but it also can not be that as well. And for someone like myself, there's lots of moments. And Steve Waugh's hitting the century off the last ball in 03, and you've got Kathy Freeman. There's so many highlighted Australian, not just Australian, but global sporting moments. What's your all-time favourite sporting moment?
Yeah, difficult one, because a little bit older than you, there's a heck of a lot of sporting moments that are in there. Mind you, being a bit older, I've forgotten a lot too. There's so many things that flash by very, very quickly. One is at school winning a premiership. That was incredible. One of my sons winning a premiership when he was at Gregory Terrace, Tim. And you mentioned Kathy Freeman. Happened to be, just by chance, happened to be there that night to see that. That was amazing, and so many other things. But I suppose the one that probably jumps out is, again, when you can achieve a first. When you're the first to do something, that's always pretty special. So I guess I'm drawn to the first Sheffield Shield win for Queensland in '95, where we went through that season and had our ups and downs, and almost didn't make the final, but finally had it at home, and then just played an outstanding game of cricket to win that Sheffield Shield. And the result was amazing, but it was the scenes after that, both at the ground and then probably over the next few weeks as we took the Sheffield Shield around the state. That one probably, at the moment, in this brief interview, probably ranks near the top.
It was also Rupert McCall's favourite moment too, from the hill.
Yes.
So he talked about that in his interview recently, that it was his favourite moment. I've got one final question, John. You mentioned about your son, and your sons have played high performing sports. As a parent, how did you go about seeing all these high performers and at the highest level in the world in your area with cricket, etc., and also other sports, and seeing the attitudes? How did you go as a parent, and what's some suggestions to parents out there that have got kids that are loving their sport and may end up becoming high performing athletes?
Yeah, look, it's a bit of a cliche, but from my point of view, I'd always just try to stand on the sidelines and watch what was going on, observe how they were going, but leave it to the coach at the time. Now, I might not have agreed with the coach at the time, what they were doing, but that wasn't my place. My place was just there to be supportive of my son and my daughters, whatever they were doing, and then, at the end of a game, wander over, congratulate coach, congratulate the team, and then, on the way home or wherever it's appropriate, just have a bit of a chat with my daughter or my son and see what they were thinking, what they were feeling, and how they responded, and what was good and what wasn't good, and then just try to listen and maybe provide some advice here and there. And then, of course, if whatever it was, if they wanted to go and do something, then I'd always be, if I was around, because in those days I certainly wasn't around as much as most parents, I suppose. But if they wanted to go and do something for their sport or about their sport, then I was always on hand to try and help them do that and have a bit more of a chat about whether it was a technical thing, whether it was a mental thing, whether it was a physical thing, and try to get them to sort of understand maybe why that was the case, of whatever was on their mind, and then try to get them to sort of come up with a solution that they were happy with, and yeah. So in the end, it was always, it's definitely not pressurising them to follow a particular sport or a particular role in a sport or have a certain set of skills. Although, knowing the sport, you could always give them some advice, general advice about, if that's where you want to go, then you should consider, having maybe all these sorts of skills. And then if you have, how do you go about doing that? But nonetheless, no, just trying to be supportive, provide help where I could, and then let them, trial and error work their way through it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a chat to Scott Roth, the coach of the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers in the NBL, and he said at a youngish age, the first 15 minutes after the game, i.e. the car ride, is where the kids feel the win, loss or draw, and it's not the parents' business to come and pick the negatives and just stay clear and stay back. It was kind of an interesting, I hadn't heard that one before about the first 15 minutes, but as you said, let them work it out and then guide when necessary.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but everybody, in a sense, everybody's a little bit different. They have their own ways, but I just always felt it was certainly my place just to be there supporting, and then offer advice if and when required.
Yep. John Buchanan, thank you so much for being on Scoreboard, the podcast today. I really do appreciate you giving and sharing some knowledge and insights into your life as a coach and your life as a business owner now in terms of what you're doing around high-performing teams. And I'm sure there's listeners out there that might be interested in your book and your services, etc. We'll put the links up and whatnot. I really do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to catching up again.
Lovely, Chris, and thanks for the time. Really enjoyed it.